everyone. This is Dan with the Spiritual Underground Podcast, coming to you from my backyard wood shop, also known as DTM Enterprises. My little wood shop handyman business in the backyard. You need any of that, go to dtmww.net. Doing handyman stuff even here through the pandemic. People still need things fixed, and seems like people are still working, or maybe we're ramping up on their housework now. So don't hesitate to reach out if there's something that you think I can do. 12-Step Spiritual Recovery is a book by James Christopher Cone. It is the 12 steps for everyone. It's a deeper dive too. It's a lot of the tribal knowledge that's been passed along to the author through his years of recovery from various teachers. A lot of this stuff is just passed along by word of mouth and tribal knowledge, and he tried to wrap up what he knows about it in that book, and he's formatted in a way that you don't have to have the traditional isms. You don't have to be a member of a traditional 12-step fellowship to get a hold of these 12-step tools. So 12-Step Spiritual Recovery, James Christopher Cone at Amazon. We also have meetings in the Louisville metropolitan areas too, if you want to check those out. And they're online, so anybody in the world can come to those meetings right now. You can find that information out. There's a Facebook page, and you can find that information out at 12stepspiritualrecovery.com. Darren Frank, his music is wrapped around this podcast. He's gracious enough, awesome musician, to allow me to use his music for this podcast. So that's what you hear on the lead in, and on the way out you can stick around and listen to a song called Let Go and Fly. And Darren's also in recovery, so most of what he writes is recovery, has a recovery flavor to it. So we'll get, if this is the first time you've been tuned into this podcast, this is primarily a 12-step recovery podcast. We deal with mostly 12-step recovery stories and philosophies. We do delve into some other areas of recovery, and I broaden that definition of recovery into anything that allows one to claim the original self, the original soul. There's one definition in a dictionary someplace that says to reclaim that which was lost or stolen. So anything like yoga and mankind and many other kind of things. And we've had people talking about putting down other substances in here like nicotine, things like that. So anything where we're doing work to better ourselves, be a better version of ourselves day by day, I consider a form of recovery at some level. So we delve into lots of that. My guest today, Nate, he's I'll just tell this story because this is how I came to know Nate. In January of 2016, I was celebrating 1 year, and I was doing that here in my hometown home group, and another few, as it so often is, a few other people were celebrating on the same night, and one of the other celebrants had asked a speaker to join the meeting and to speak. And this is typically a discussion meeting, but a lot of times the tradition is that if you're celebrating a birthday, you can have a speaker come in, you ask the speaker to come in and tell their story. And that's what this gal did. And Nate spoke at my first birthday. Now, none of that was planned or orchestrated at any level, but nonetheless, I can say today that whether Nate knew it or not, he spoke at my first birthday, or he spoke for me on my first birthday. He's got a great story and delivers it well, and has just a fantastic way and energy and way of doing it. And I've actually heard Nate speak a couple other times since then, had that honor to do that, just frankly by accident again. Just popped into a meeting, and the speaker was Nate. I think one of them was the Fishhead Friday meeting one night, I think. So we were on a Zoom meeting the other night, and Nate been coming to our home group meeting the last few Tuesdays, and he's in early. He gets there early. What do you think about that? Come early, stay late, right? and so we got to chatting, and made an offer to come in and share his story here, and he took me up on it, and that was just a week or so ago. So Nate is my guest today, and we'll get on to the content of the podcast, which will be Nate's story. What's your sobriety date, Nate?
My sobriety date is August 18th, 2011. 2011.
Mm-hmm. 2011 was the year I came to my first AA meeting. Had 4 years of bouncing around before the miracle happened. I'm a product to keep coming back.
Uh-huh.
How you doing today, man?
Good. How are you?
I am awesome.
Good.
I'm always get juiced up when I do this. I work my butt off all day long. And I know I got podcasts that later on in the evening or whatever, and I know it's going to raise my spirit when I come and do this. It's that natural high we're all looking for, that clean and sober, juiced up life. And this thing, this does it for me, is sitting and getting to know somebody better across this table.
Yeah.
So how's this whole pandemic affecting you lately?
It has slowed business down a little bit, but probably the biggest thing the biggest way that it's affected me, and first let me just
Go ahead.
I'd like to just mention what a sense of humor God has. I notice it today. I'm sure it's been that way my whole life, but sometimes today there are just glaring ways that it smacks me in the face, and this situation was one of them where I had to just sit by myself and start laughing because about 6 or 8 months ago you asked me to join you in one of these podcasts, and I think in my head I thought, it's really foreign to me. I'm used to talking in front of a group of live people, and I thought, well, maybe that's not for me, and so I told you I think I'm gonna have to pass, and so then the pandemic hits, right? And the only way I can go to meetings is through Zoom. And it, besides my home group, Spiritual Underground was the first meeting that I hit on that Tuesday. And it had been a meeting I'd been wanting to go to for some time, but on Tuesday nights I take a meeting into a treatment center in Jeff. And so, every week I think, well, I would like to go there, but this is, one of the most important things I do in a given week is to take this meeting into a treatment center. Right, it's my favorite meeting. I get the most out of walking in and sitting down in a room full of people who don't even know what's wrong with them yet, and try to just tell them what happened to me, and I love it. But I've always wanted to go to that meeting. So the first week I log into Spiritual Underground, and you're sitting behind the mic, and I can't go to live in-person meetings, and I'm sitting in an online room with you and maybe one or two other guys before the meeting got started, and I thought, wow, God, you remember that third step prayer, don't you? And then you asked me if I was interested in still doing it.
I just keep the invitation open. Sometimes somebody's not ready or whatever, or maybe they need some time to think about it. Like we were saying a minute ago, I hold no animosity whatsoever if somebody doesn't want to do it. But the flip side is I always try to get back and say, look, the invitation is open.
That's how you graciously
later on,
put it.
You can come back again. You come back and let me know, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really glad you changed your mind, and I see what you mean by that. Here you're forced into this virtual world. I had some resistance to it in the beginning. Mm-hmm. We actually held one TSSR meeting out past when we really should have, when everybody else was calling them off. And there still was a few lingering face-to-face meetings going. Yeah. And there was a little thing in my crawl that kind of was like, maybe this ain't a good idea. Having that last face-to-face, but it was the 1-year anniversary of our meetings for TSSR. Yeah. And that was the 1-year meeting, and it's like, let's just get that one in, so we can celebrate that. And people are not comfortable coming. And we actually did a combined Zoom face-to-face. I took my computer and we Zoomed people in that didn't want to come or for whatever reason. And we had a hybrid Zoom. But I did have some resistance to it in the beginning. Yeah. I was like, man.
But the other part of that for me was that before this happened, I had been telling all my friends I need to get out to some other meetings. I've been sober a while, and I'm a creature of habit. I'm set in my ways. I go to the same meetings generally, and unless somebody asks me to speak for a birthday or something like that. And I kept saying I need to get out, check out some different meetings. Now I've got no choice, but it's really neat because the whole world is opened up. I can go to a meeting in California if I want to, and that's cool too.
That is really cool. I think this will become. I think this little element of this may stick at some level. I think maybe meetings some of them may be available to you both ways, and I have Darren, the guy I was talking about at the beginning of this. He's hospital bound. He's in a physical rehab center over some health issues over in Louisville, and he hasn't been able to go to hardly any meetings prior to this. And then when the COVID thing came about, they locked it down where he can't have guests or leave either one. And this actually gives him an opportunity to make the meeting every week and other meetings too. So it's getting some people in to be able to to join meetings that would not be able to otherwise. Bedridden people and things like that. So I mean, there's always that silver lining in all this stuff that that pops in like this. It's definitely interesting, and I agree 100% with the higher power having a sense of humor thing, because I'll watch some things, and that's my reaction too. I love today that I can be aware of it, and laugh at it. I just giggle.
Yep.
I have a little thing where I will look upward. I don't know if that's where God is for sure or not, but that's what direction I look when I think that way, and I go, okay, and look up in there and go, all right, here we go. Cool, like that one. Good job.
Yep, he remembers that third step prayer even when I forget it.
Yep. So did you grow up around here?
I did. I grew up in Jeff.
You still live in Jeff?
Yeah.
Or have you been a lifelong Jeff resident?
No, I the last 8 years of my drinking were in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Just right up the road.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, tell me about how. I do like to hear a little bit about family life and how people grew up. I usually see that there's something in there when we get the fog lifted off of us. I'd like to tell you before that none of that mattered, right?
Yeah. Right.
Well, the fact of the matter is that it does matter, and,
Absolutely.
and it's also not anybody. The one thing I always try to get through to my people I'm working with is it's not a blame game. That is not what I'm trying to do. I'm not looking to throw mom and dad under the bus. I'm not trying to. We just got, like the book says, we're looking at causes and conditions, and the fact of the matter is, I feel like we're somewhat trained just like pets.
Yeah.
There's certain things, and I still can find myself Pavlov's dogged over things that, when the right bell rings, you're going to get the same reaction out of me every time. And I had to work hard not to revert back to those old actions. I have to be aware and catch myself before I jump, and a lot of that came from how I was raised.
Yeah. And alcohol is just a symptom.
Yeah.
Well, that's usually when I'm at the podium at a meeting. How I start out is I don't delve deep into it, but I come from a really good family. My parents are still married. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, and I'm the only alcoholic in my immediate family. And I can tell you how I know that. I know that because my brother can sit down and watch a football game and have 1 beer. My sister years ago got a DUI, and she didn't drink for years because of a consequence of drinking. And when I got sober, my parents told me that they quit drinking because they saw what a problem it caused me. And I thought, I am not like any of those 4 people. I've never stopped drinking because of consequences. If anything, I drank more to deal with the consequences. I've never been able to sit down and just have a beer or two. And I never stopped because I saw it cause somebody else problems. I always thought I was different. I was different than the people that I could see it causing problems.
Yeah.
And so looking back, I was very different than that. But like I said, I come from a really good family. They're a religious family. They were a lot more religious, I think, when I was growing up. There was a lot of rules, and I never much cared for all the rules. And at some point in my life, I decided that was for the birds, and I was going to try life on my own because I was smarter than all of them anyway. And
bigger than the rules.
Yeah, there you go. I have always felt like the rules didn't apply to me. And I had my first drink at 17, and it wasn't the first opportunity I had to drink. I remember growing up, like sleeping over at friends' houses and stuff. They might drink a beer or two, and I didn't. I think I was scared of getting in trouble.
Yeah.
And finally, when I was 17, I started running around with some people that were a little wilder than the guys I went to high school with, and a guy in my neighborhood who was in his 20s asked me if I wanted to go to a concert. And I was like, sure, I'll go to a concert with you. And he said, do you drink? And I said, yes. I just wanted to fit in, right? So I told him yes. And he said, good, bring some money. So I brought a pocket full of money, and we go to this concert hall in Louisville. And I remember walking in, and it was growing up in a religious household what I had always imagined a nightclub looked like. It was glamorous. The lights were going, and it was dark, but the lights were flashing, and there was women, and there was music. And I remember giving him a couple dollars, and he went up to the bar, and he came back with 2 of those clear plastic cups of Bud Light. And he goes, you're going to have to drink it real fast and turn your back to the crowd so the bouncers don't see you and get us both kicked out. Now, I was 17, right? So he hands one to me, and I turn my back, and I drink it real fast. And, a lot of times in meetings I hear people talk about a feeling that immediately came over them. And I didn't get that fuzzy head-to-toe feeling. But what happened to me is I started to feel comfortable in this nightclub in a way that I'd never felt comfortable before in my life. And I kept giving him money, and he kept going up and buying me beers, and I kept drinking them fast. I didn't realize that wouldn't be a problem for me. And I remember having a blast. It was one of the best nights of my life. And we were driving home. He was driving me home, and this guy looks over at me, and he goes, "Nate, I think you drank more than I did." And I thought, God, not only do I love this, but I'm good at it. And I didn't wake up and start drinking in the morning the next day or anything like that, but I remember it becoming a conscious thing where I wanted more of that. I started just look for opportunities to drink. I started to look for places people would be drinking and parties where people would be drinking, and I started to hang out with people who would be drinking. And I started to keep a bottle of alcohol under the seat of my car, not because every time I drove I was drinking, but because it made me feel comfortable. And if I got into a situation where I felt uncomfortable, I could drink, whether I was uncomfortable or just didn't like the way I was feeling or whatever it was. I could drink.
Kept some medicine under the seat.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about that until I'd been sober a little while, and I started to remember that I did that. I'm like, man, even from early on, like I realized what a difference it made in how I felt.
Yeah.
And it helped me deal with life.
Yeah, I can. It does. I think everybody, that warm fuzzy is something I didn't really have the first time either, but I definitely knew from that point forward that this was something I was going to continue doing. Mm-hmm. Now, I got sicker and shit the very first time too, and I actually grew up in the house that we're at. And listeners have heard this before, but first time I drank was on a snow day in that house. Uh-huh. And a buddy of mine called me up, said, "Your mom and dad work, don't they?" And yeah, and they said, "How about we come over and drink some beer?" And like you, I didn't really drink, but I wanted to be in. And really probably thinking back, I know Earl Hightower says that when they asked him if he wanted to smoke a joint, he said he didn't have any idea what a joint was, but he said yes because he wanted to fit in, wanted to be in the in crowd, right? Be a part of. He said, if they'd asked me if we wanted to go kill the Spanish teacher, I'd have said, yeah. and that's the same thing here. And the guy who came, he drove down the street in a moped, brought beer over. Everybody had the guy who was like in the 7th or 8th grade, had the full beard, right? You had that friend. Well, he could go up to the liquor store and get beer. Uh-huh. And he come down the road with little King's boxes on his lap on the moped in the snow. Wow. And he wiped out coming in my driveway. He slid down. He didn't make the turn. And we ran out there and rescued the beer and then went out and helped him up.
Yeah, priority.
And come in here and did that. And although I was sicker than hell, I did have a momentary thing the next morning feeling pretty crappy of thinking I wouldn't do that again. Mm-hmm. But once I shook that off, I was looking for the next opportunity, and that never did stop.
Yeah.
And the same way, you said something, I say bell ringers, things that ring my bell that relate. My dad, when I first hit the rooms, and told my parents that I was going to AA. My dad has told me he had one beer since then. He stopped drinking that day. Wow. And he said, a buddy of his said, "You want a beer once?" And he said, I popped it open and started drinking it and going, this tastes like shit. And said, and basically snuck around the corner and poured it out and said no thank you to the second one.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, that they're able to put it down.
Yeah.
For the sake of somebody else. Because that sure wasn't in my resume.
Me neither. And isn't it wild how we affect the people in our lives and don't see it? Yeah. At least I couldn't see it while it was happening.
And even for a while afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
There's that more will be disclosed kind of stuff. And that, I kind of think of seeing it as like almost there's a fog back there. And I can only see through certain portions of it. And as I get more and more clarity in my life, I can see that stuff better and better as I go down. And there's the flip side of that. Some of that stuff is starting to get foggy in the other end. Some of those old memories are starting to fade. They don't have the, it's kind of like the same thing. They don't carry the weight they used to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Some of that emotional baggage is lightened and there's still fog. It's still clearing. So enough years of drinking.
This thing is a lifetime journey. It's not an overnight matter.
It sure isn't. When you mentioned getting sick, it was my second or third drunk, and those early drinks weren't just drinks; they were all drunks. Like every time I drank, I got drunk. For the most part, there were a few times where I didn't, where I could still kind of manage it. but I wanted to get drunk. Like, I didn't want to just drink for a buzz. I wanted to get drunk. And it was my second or third one. I got like alcohol poisoning sick, where I was sick at school for several days, and I still was just looking forward to the next one. I talked one time at a birthday, and a guy that I'm friends with now came up to me, and it was the part where I was talking about drinking to fit in, and he said, "Nate, I think everybody did that." And I said, "Yeah, but everybody didn't then grab that, and it became the way they managed their life." And I said, "That's what makes me different. I'm sure everybody, did stuff to fit in, but I found alcohol, and it suddenly became the way that I dealt with everything.
Yeah.
Whether I realized it or not, it started to take over all aspects of my life. So
yeah, because you go, okay, it'll work for this. I'll try it on that. Oh, it worked there too.
Yeah.
I'll try it here. And for
did.
a while, it pretty much did.
Yeah.
It pretty much did work for everything.
Or even if it didn't, it still became the best solution I had.
Yeah, it's the best. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I remember early on, I started to have consequences from drinking and driving and things like that before I was even legally old enough to drink.
Yeah, I had 2 DUIs before I was 21.
I remember pretty vividly deciding I was going to not drink for a while. And I just couldn't deal with life. When the big book talks about getting tight, I knew what it was talking about, because I remember I was maybe 20 or something like that, and I went to a party, and most everybody else was drinking, and I wasn't that night, and I just remember feeling so out of place, more out of place in the world than I felt before that I drank to try to fix, and suddenly I didn't have the one thing that helped me, and so I was just left sitting there feeling out of place. And I thought, well, this isn't going to work. Even if it's causing me problems, I'm going to have to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And I also remember telling the woman I was with at the time, I said, I feel like it's just cutting me off spiritually from the world. And those were words that, I don't know where they came from, but that's really what I felt like it was doing. And still it was my only solution. It was the only thing I could do. So I kept doing it. I went off to college, and I could finally drink on my own. I didn't have my parents to sneak around or anything like that. And I've never liked authority, so I went off to school for business management, because I thought someday I'll be a boss somewhere and nobody will be able to tell me what to do. I can drink at work, I can run the show, and everything will be great. And no matter where I go, there I am. I would have told you I got homesick after the first year, but really what was happening was alcohol was affecting. So I get kicked out of the dorms my first semester in school because they had a zero tolerance policy on drugs, and I had some drugs and alcohol in my room, and they caught me and some buddies of mine smoking a joint in a parking lot, right? And we were done with the joint, but the cops knew what we were doing, and they said, we're going to search your room. So they came up and they found stuff in my room. They kicked me out of the dorms. So I joined a fraternity because I want to stay in school, right? And I figured these guys party like I do. And they did on the weekends, but then during the week they're studying and doing stuff like that. And I'm walking around looking for somebody to drink with, and they're all like doing what they're supposed to be doing, and I'm drinking. It was a daily part of my life at that point in time. It had gone from just a fun thing to do to I had to do it every day. But I wasn't doing it every day like I thought alcoholics did, waking up and drinking. I would still go to class, and I'd get done with whatever homework I had to get done with, and then I would start drinking. I'd drink until I passed out, and I started doing that every day. And eventually at first year of college ended, and I decided college wasn't for me. It was for suckers who need that to get through life, and I just figured it out on my own, and I came back to southern Indiana and moved into my parents' basement again, and tried to figure it out from there. I started selling used cars. When I got to AA, my sponsor told me I've been a con man my whole life, and con men do real well selling used cars. And that's not to say every used car salesman's a con man, but I sure was and did well selling used cars. And I remember, I had a lot of consequences from drinking. You get pulled over in a company car, and that kind of stuff, and they let me keep my job because I was good at it, but it was just constant consequences, and eventually they let me go, and I left there and met a woman who lived in Cincinnati, so I moved to Cincinnati because maybe if I change the environment, maybe if I get out of Jeffersonville where they're picking on me, things will change, and it did for a little while. It got better for a little while, and then I caught up with me, and it was the same story up there.
Yeah, no matter where you go, there you are. And,
no matter.
Yeah, the geographical cure is, it's a cliche, that so many people try and change locations to fix me.
Yep. And I find the same people and the same places and the same things, and
Yeah.
start repeating the same behavior.
That whole thing was this: if you moved, what did they say, Greenland or Iceland, and he'd still find somebody giving him a bottle.
Right. So I'm living in Cincinnati, and I'm getting to that point where I'm drinking earlier and earlier in the day, and I'm managing a cell phone store in downtown, and I really liked downtown Cincinnati because there were bars and nightclubs everywhere, and I was managing a store, right? So as long as I got everything kind of where it needed to be, I could wander off to the bar for a little while and come back, or bring a bottle to work, and nobody really said anything. And I was before I moved to downtown Cincinnati, I was managing this store, and I was living in the suburbs. And my last DUI, I had been drinking all day at work, and I went home, and I decided that I needed to call the dope man because I ran out of dope. And so I get in my car and I'm driving to him, and apparently I'm driving a lot faster. I was in a hurry to get to the dope man, and I see red and blue lights. And I'd had so many DUIs up to this point where I was really tired of getting DUIs, and I thought, what have I been doing wrong all these years? It's obviously not the drinking and driving. Maybe what I've been doing wrong is pulling over, and if I just don't pull over, I won't get a DUI.
Just don't let them catch you.
Yeah, just don't let them catch you. So I had this idea several times on DUIs before, but it never pulled the trigger. So this time I thought, if I get up on the highway and I pull over and I let him get to my back bumper, I can take off and I can get away from this guy. So that's what I did. I got up on the highway on 75 North in Cincinnati, and I pulled over, and he gets to my back bumper, and I just take off.
Do you?
Yeah, and I see a cloud of dust go up, and I see this guy run and jump back in his car, and I've taken off, and I've got the pedal down to the floor, and I see him come up behind me, and he's got one of those police interceptor motors, so he's right behind me, but I keep going, and I'm getting a little distance from him. I keep looking in the rear view, and I see more lights, and before I know it, the whole highway looks like a circus, all these lights, and I think maybe this was a bad idea. And I thought, I can't get away from him on the highway. I'm going to have to get off and hit a side road or something. And so I get off and take an exit, and I go weaving in and out of traffic and running red lights and probably cutting people off, and finally, I don't see any lights anymore, and I think I got away from this guy. I should have been doing this for years. And I start stopping at red lights and blending back into traffic, and then suddenly this light comes down from the sky, and all these cops come out of side roads, and they surround me. And this cop pulls me out of the car, and he picks me up and puts me in his car, and he goes, "You didn't know we had helicopters, did you?"
Yeah.
And I realized why I hadn't been running from them for years. They pulled me over with a helicopter. and that was my last DUI. It wasn't because I quit drinking. I decided to get responsible. And what responsible meant for me was I moved downtown, so I lived and worked a block away from each other. And I put my vehicle in a parking garage, and I didn't use it. It just sat there and collected dust. And I would call taxis if I needed to leave downtown or call a friend. And I spent my time in bars and at work, and that was it.
That is responsible.
Yeah, I mean, in a way it is.
They say don't drink and drive.
There you go. I did it.
I have a friend who started living on Uber.
Uh-huh.
He's later on down the pike. There wasn't no Uber when I was back then.
Yeah, me neither.
He was late enough that Uber worked for him, and he actually got to know his Uber driver pretty well, and could pat himself on the back for being responsible in that regard.
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't putting anybody's life at risk, right?
Yeah.
But I was still, I was to the point now where I was waking up and drinking, and I would go and, my dream had always been to own my own business. So I had opened my own business with money I had stolen from my previous employer. And so I was running this cell phone store, and I opened a pawn shop, right? And I had been over the years stealing money out of the till and covering it up and built up enough money to open my own business. And I was so proud. Like I had finally arrived. That quote in the big book hit me like a ton of bricks. So I have my own business, and I have everything I'd always wanted. I can do whatever I want. And I'm waking up and drinking, and I'm running my store, and I started to have some real bad health problems. I was getting like intense headaches and chest pains, and I couldn't sleep. And normally I would just put it off and drink, and it would eventually go away. But it was getting worse and worse, and I knew something was wrong. So I went to the doctor, and they ran a bunch of tests and couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And then a few days after going to the doctor, I fell out at work. One of the women that worked for me rushed me to the emergency room, and it turned out I have type 1 diabetes, which doesn't mix well with drinking the way that I did.
Right.
And so I spent 8 days in a coma in ICU, in and out of a coma. After 8 days, I come out of this coma, and a doctor walks in the room, and my family's there, and they're all teary-eyed and stressed looking. And the doctor says, "Mr. Hawk, do you drink?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "How much?" I said, "Well, I'm a heavy drinker." He said, "God, you must be." He said, "You died twice." He said, "We were able to bring you back. You didn't die from complications from diabetes. You died because you were withdrawing so hard we couldn't stabilize you because of the diabetes complications." And he said, "If you drink again, it's probably going to kill you." And I remember feeling so good in that hospital bed. Like I was 8 days without a drink, which had been a long time since I hadn't drank in 8 days. And plus I had all that stuff that was in the IVs they were giving me. So I felt great. And I got out of that hospital, and I made a decision that I was never going to drink again. And I started, waking up early in the morning and getting breakfast and a newspaper and eating it in the park and thinking, this must be what normal people feel like. I felt phenomenal. And people cared about me. Like the people from the bars were checking on me to see how I was doing, right? That's where I spent all my time. And I was, I was putting on a little weight, and things were great for those couple of weeks. And I made it 18 days. I know how many days it is because I count days I don't drink because I'm a drunk.
Yeah,
and
you know exactly how many
I
days
know
it's been.
exactly how many days it was. And let me tell you about the night of the 17th day. The night of the 17th day, I started Googling how many drinks you can have with type 1 diabetes without it killing you. And all of the websites said 0. And I spent a couple hours heavily searching Google until I found a website that said I could have 2 drinks. And that next day I went out and I sat down at a bar and I ordered a vodka and ice, which is what I was drinking there toward the end of my drinking. And the bartender knew me and she said, "Nate, are you sure that's a good idea? Didn't they say you would die?" And I said, "No, I'll be all right. I can have 2. Google said so." So she shakes her head.
On the internet.
Yeah, she shakes her head and slides it across the bar to me, and I drank it. It really made me feel queasy. But I could have 2, so I ordered another one. And she slid it across the bar, and I drank it, and I felt sick. So I went home and I laid down. But I tried it again the next day, and I tried it again the next day, and I tried it again the next day. And within a very short period of time, I was going down to the liquor store and getting a 5th, and taking 2 like Polar Pop cups with ice and a little bit of cranberry juice or something in them, and splitting a 5th between 2 cups. And was convinced that that's basically 2 drinks.
It's still 2 drinks.
Yeah. Everything in me knew that was 2 drinks.
Yeah.
And that was going to be okay. And for the first time in like my whole life drinking, I felt guilty about drinking because my family cared about me and my friends cared about me. People cared about me and they knew I was going to die. And I had never before in my drinking life, besides when I was a kid, felt like I had to hide it. I was always kind of proud of it. Like, this is who I am. If you don't like it, fuck off. But I finally felt like I'm stuck like this. Like, I'm going to be like this the rest of my life, and now I'm going to have to start hiding it because it's going to affect my health. And it did. The last year and a half, it's kind of foggy, but it's somewhere in that range of a year and a half of my drinking. It got really ugly. It was an unlicensed pawn shop that I decided to open because rules don't apply to me and licenses are for suckers, right? So they started, the detectives in the city of Cincinnati started serving search warrants on it because I wasn't following any rules and I was drunk all the time. Most of the time I was 2 doors down at a bar. I would get the store open and the people that worked for me set up, and then I'd go down and start drinking. And so the mailman would come down and deliver my mail at the bar, and once in a while the detective would stick his head in the door because he knew that's where I'd be, or one of the people that worked for me would call and say, "Hey, the detectives are here. You might want to, get down here." And so it was just getting really ugly. I did what we drunks generally do there toward the end of drinking. I stopped paying bills and I stopped opening the store on a regular basis for 2 reasons. I was scared of going to jail, and I was I was getting so bad that there were a lot of days I just couldn't get up and going.
Were they down there looking for you because you weren't operating right, or was it because of things?
Oh yeah, yeah. So if you have a pawn shop, you knowingly buy a lot of stolen stuff, but there's protocol for it where you turn in serial numbers to the police and they run it through their system, and if it clears, you can sell it. And I wasn't doing any of that because I knew a lot of it was stolen and I wanted the profit from it, right? So I was just selling it anyway and just kind of fudging a bunch of stuff.
Okay,
and
so
eventually
it started looking like dealing in stolen property and
yes,
things like
because
that.
that's exactly what it was. And they knew that, and I knew that, and they were just trying to put everything together so they could charge me with it.
And the other side of that's illegal if you'll jump through their hoops.
Yeah, right. But I didn't want to do that.
Yeah,
I'm not a good hoop jumper.
Yeah, even through this pandemic thing, I find out that there's two things I really, really don't like. Is one of them is being told what to do, and the other is to be told what to do by the government, specifically.
Yeah.
Both of those things will get that Pavlov's dog thing earlier on that we was talking about. Both those things will make me go, no, I'm not doing it. Mainly because you told me to.
So we were talking before this that I flip houses now, and so Lowe's is still an essential business, and I still go into Lowe's to buy materials.
Me too.
Or order materials, right? Well, when I want to see another alcoholic, I just go to Lowe's because we're all in there. Yeah. Everybody wants to isolate till they're told they have to, and then suddenly they're like, "Where can I go?
Yeah.
I'll go to the doctor and I'll go to Lowe's."
Right. Yeah.
anywhere I can just get out and not be told what to do.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, that's been my story my whole life.
Yeah, I had a little panic when they first started. I was like, are the Home Depots and the big box stores going to be considered when all that stuff come around? It's just like, what is essential?
Sure.
And and I was really relieved to hear that. Well, because I'm doing the same kind of thing. I'm out. I need 75% anyway, and my jobs require some material of some sort.
Right.
Those places closed down. I probably got enough inventory to do a little work, but
got to be able to go to Lowe's.
Yeah, and you're right, man. Those places are busy.
Yeah, at least that's my ticket out of the house these days. So
yeah,
I get in and out quick, and then get to work. And we work in vacant houses, so it's not. I don't get a whole lot of exposure to the public or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm just dealing with people pretty much one or two at a time, and some of my work's outside too. So, I'm out working, repairing a deck or fixing some handrails or putting in some handrails outside or, certain things. A lot of the work I'm doing is just outside somebody's house. There's no reason I can't be standing in somebody's front yard.
Yeah, right.
By myself.
Yep. I can stand in mine. It is nice. I've got to know my neighbors better. We all just stand in our driveways and talk.
I see that. This neighborhood was alive. It's a dead end street, so it's relatively safe for kids to play on and stuff, and as safe as any. And I've noticed the neighborhood has come back alive. It really has died almost the past bunch of years, and I still after we moved in here 47 years ago when I was 3 years old. Moved into this house, so there's still neighbors, there's still people in this neighborhood that have lived there longer than us.
Oh, that's cool.
And I've known some of them for a long time, but kind of recycles. And now there's a bunch of kids on the neighborhood and young parents and stuff, and kids are running up down on bicycles and those electric John Deere Jeeps and and all this and colored on the sidewalk. And I've seen more people outside playing in the past month than I recall seeing in quite some time on some kind of regular basis as you're traveling around town and whatnot. It's refreshing, actually.
It is. It's kind of neat. That and people helping people with projects and stuff. It's, just it's neat to watch, neat to be a part of.
So the detectives were coming around, finding you at the bar. You had to close it. You just eventually closed down the pawn shop?
Yeah, so I eventually just completely closed it down. And it was a convenient timing because they were cutting the power off anyway. I was plugged into a next door neighbor and that kind of thing. I was just trying to stay open long enough to put some money in my pocket to drink and that type of stuff. And it was summer of 2011, the middle of summer, and it was hot in downtown. And I remember just being miserable. And I met this young woman who was a heroin addict, and we kind of hit it off. And I started staying with her. And in hindsight, this is one of those funny things. I thought I was better than her because I'm an alcoholic. Now, I certainly had a long history with drugs too, but my problem primarily was drinking. And she was a heroin addict, right? So I'm better than her in my head. However, somehow she had her rent paid. She had electric. The air conditioning was on in her place, and I didn't really care for her that much. But she had all that stuff going for her. So I thought, well, I need to kind of hang out with her for a while. So that's what I was doing. And I can tell you, one of the loneliest times of my life when I got to AA, and the Big Book talks about knowing loneliness as few do. I'm hanging out with this woman that I don't really even care for, and she would leave. I remember her leaving on the 4th of July to go hang out with some friends. And, of course, she invited me to come along. I'm like, no, I'm just going to hang out here because I didn't want to do anything anymore. I was just sitting there drinking and thinking about my life falling apart and kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do with that. And I sat alone in her apartment because my electric was cut off for the weekend drinking. And I just remember feeling like the only person in the world. And around that time... my sister and I have always been close. She's 7 years younger than me, and we've always been really good friends growing up and throughout our adulthood. And she came up to visit me and could apparently see I was in pretty rough shape.
Right.
I still didn't realize how rough a shape I was in. But, I mean, if I was awake, I was drinking, and I was miserable, and my blood sugar was all whacked out, and my health was failing. And so she goes, Nate, do you need some help? And I said, no, I'm going to figure something out. And she goes, well, give me a call if you do. And a couple weeks went by, and I realized that what was going to happen very soon was I was either going to get arrested and go to jail where I couldn't drink, or I was going to be homeless. And if you're diabetic and homeless and alcoholic, you're probably going to die pretty quick too. And at least that was what I had summarized. My two options didn't look very good. Yeah. So I call her and I say, hey, I need somewhere to go to get back on my feet. And she goes, well, I talked to Mom and Dad. They said you can come stay with them for a little while until you get back on your feet. And so the parents that for the last few years during holidays, I would call them as I was walking through the barroom door and tell them, hey, my car won't start. I can't make it. Yeah. They came up and picked me up and helped me pack a few things into some garbage bags, and I left everything else behind. And they offer, they're like, we can kind of help you get some of this stuff. And I'm like, nah, I don't care about any of it. I just want out, right? And so I pack up with them and head back to southern Indiana and to the basement where I always retreated. Yep. And I was sitting in my parents' kitchen. So I don't remember what day of the week it was or anything. They were all pretty much the same to me by then. Kind of like now. Yeah. Yeah. But in a very different way. So I'm sitting in my parents' basement. I had just woke up and I'm drinking, and my dad comes downstairs and he said, Nate, do you want to quit drinking? And I said, no, but I think I have to. And he said, well, maybe we can find someone for you to talk to. And I remember sitting at their kitchen table with them sometime within those few days. And my parents, like I said, they're religious. They have their feet really well planted on the ground, right? They're not Al-Anon or anything like that, although they did tell me they checked out one Al-Anon meeting when I came back to southern Indiana, and they looked at me and they said, look, we love you, but we're not just going to watch you die. So you can stay here if you're going to try to do something to get better, but if you want to keep drinking, you're going to have to find somewhere else to do it. And I didn't realize it at the time. Like, I started crying, and I didn't realize it at the time, but that stance that they made was so instrumental in my life. Right. Because I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing, but I just couldn't see any other option. And they found a guy for me to talk to.
It's magnificent. I say it all the time. Your family members actually have that unique position to be able to create some consequences for us. Yeah. But it's rare that they will actually do so. Yeah. I commend your parents for putting that ultimatum out there that you can continue to do what you're doing. You can go do that someplace else. If you want some help, you can stay here as long as you want.
And I have thanked them multiple times for that. I don't know if they realized how
big.
How big that was. But as I've been in recovery for some years now, and I see people whose families just keep enabling them, it makes me so grateful that they just drew a line and said, look, we're not going to let this happen. We're here for you if you want to get help. And so my dad has talked to a therapist over the years, and he asked for a referral from that guy for somebody for me to talk to. And they took me to see a guy who I think was an alcoholic. He wouldn't tell me that, but I think he must have been. And there's just a way an alcoholic can see another alcoholic when I can't see myself. And this guy asked me a few questions, and I thought he was going to be real interested in everything that I'd been through and all that, and he did not care. He just goes, Nate, and he was real firm about it. Nate, a fellow like you's got a few options. And I think, well, options are good. I need options. And he goes, you ever tried a 12-step program? And as many times as prosecutors and probation officers and judges had made me go to AA to get cards signed, I didn't know what a 12-step program was, right? And I say, no, what's that? And he goes, AA. And you could have heard a pin drop. I didn't want AA, right? I told him that doesn't work. And I said, I've tried it a bunch of times, and I didn't tell him that I would go and see how they sign the cards and then sign them myself and stop going. But he goes, you'd probably get something out of it if you put something into it. And I asked him what my other option was, and he said, you can die. And he goes, and it's probably going to happen pretty fast for a guy like you. And I didn't feel brave enough to die yet, so I just told him I'd try AA, and he goes, good. You should go somewhere and detox first. And I knew what detox meant. I'd done that on my own before. So he said they had a treatment center. Yeah, I knew that was no fun. And he said, we've got a treatment center in Alabama you can go to. And he goes, it's 2 weeks. And I said, that's a long time. And he goes, that's the short one. He goes, the long one's 28 days. And I said, well, then I'll do 2 weeks. And he goes, good, we can get you in Saturday. And I said, what about Saturday 2 weeks from now?
Yeah,
I'm just not ready yet.
Just not ready yet. As miserable as I was, I would choke down that first drink of the day because my body didn't even want to take it in, and feel sick, and drink all day and pass out, and then come to and do it again. And I still wanted more. Like, I still just couldn't see it any other way.
Yeah.
When the Big Book talks about not being able to imagine life without alcohol, I knew exactly what that meant.
Yeah.
They put my feelings into words.
Right.
And I love that about the Big Book.
Yeah, it is. It's great. And that years ago, too, that stuff is just exactly as relevant as it was when they wrote it. Even,
Sure.
I like it when I get to that part talking about lunar flight, and, in the 30s, they're talking about that. And you do realize how long before actual time we were on the moon that this book says this, right?
Right.
We kind of take that for granted. But that insanity, that way it just hijacks your operating system. That's the best way I can put it. It's like a computer virus or a parasite or something. It totally takes you over, and you're like you said, as miserable as it was, I'm not done yet. I'm not, I remember when first time I came to a treatment center, it was back then in 2011 when I first tried, and my doctor got me a referral to Wellstone out there, and I went and talked to them, and they recommended I come in and detox. And I was like, well, how long is that? And they said, it'll be a week. And I'm like, well, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're out of your mind.
I'm thinking maybe overnight or something, I maybe could pull something like that off. And it's the same thing. Well, what else do you have to offer me? And they go, well, now I can look back and I see her. At the time I had no idea, but now I remember her expression of like, well, we can put you in outpatient if you want, and I could hear her, same old, just like, here we go again with one of these jackasses that are not going to do what they need to do because they think, frankly, I thought the world couldn't do without me, really.
Yeah.
I had too much shit going on to be gone for a week. Wife and kids, a job, all this stuff going on. How you going to take me out of circulation for a week? Mm-hmm. Kidding me?
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had nothing going on anymore, and I still felt that way.
Yeah.
I'm unemployed, living in my parents' basement, hiding from the police in Cincinnati, and still somehow I can't be out of commission for 2 weeks.
Yeah, people say, my job will fire me. I was like, no, they won't. How many times you done this to your job? Never. They won't fire you the first time, man. They won't.
Right.
Now you keep doing this.
You keep doing this, they will.
Yeah, but you get one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you might get two, but I don't tell them that. In my head, I actually had two with one employer. And before that they paid for me to go to rehab. But everybody, that's it's cliche. It's almost like I can mouth the words when you say, because I always ask a guy, are you going to be able to stop today? Are you going to be able to not drink tomorrow? Can you go tomorrow without drinking? Mm-hmm. You got to tell me the truth here, because this is life or death. You die in DTs of alcohol and stuff, so, there's nothing to be playing around with. And they'll say, whether if they can or can't. Sometimes people could be honest, and they'll say, no, I can't go through tomorrow. And I said, well, we need to get you in detox place, man, where they'll take care of you, and they'll make sure you get through this thing as easy as it can be, and you'll be safe and all that, and they go, wow, and I can almost mouth it, I have a job. What's my wife? And they go through the excuses about why they can't be taken. Can't be taken away. You just told me you can't get it tomorrow. Now a guy can do it. And now and again, guys say, yeah, I can do that, and they will. They'll stop tomorrow, and they'll stay stopped. I didn't DT. I wasn't a guy who got serious. Sounds like you, when you slammed the brakes on, there were some physical repercussions of stopping.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was very adamant that it be a medical facility because the one time where toward the end that I had tried to quit on my own, and I didn't even realize I didn't know alcohol would make you shake and stuff like that. It was when I was still in Cincinnati. It was a holiday, and it was toward the end of my drinking. So I mean, I was already like hit when I would come to in the morning, and I just decided to stay in bed all day. And at 5 o'clock, I woke up and got out of bed to get something to eat, and I was shaking like terribly, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought it was a diabetic thing, right? And I tried to wait it out, and it was getting worse and worse. And I call an ambulance, and they come and they start asking me questions, and they're like, "This isn't diabetes." They're like, "Do you drink?" And I said, "Yeah." And they goes, "When was your last drink?" I said, "Yesterday." They said, "You're going through DTs." I'm like, "This is a thing?" They're like, "Yeah, we need to get you in some fluids and all that." So they take me to the emergency room. They give me Valium. I'm like, "Well, I'm good. You can let me go now."
Okay, cool.
Thank you. I'll call a ride, and I did. And I told my ride, I said, "I'm hungry. I need you to drop me off at this bar so I can get something to eat." And she did. And of course I didn't get something to eat. I went in and I started drinking because I was on Valium. I felt better.
Yeah, right.
And that vicious cycle. And
yeah.
So sometimes today in recovery, as I sponsor guys or try to help a newcomer, I have to remember how crazy I was.
Yep.
Because sometimes I'll get frustrated, and I was so lucky to find a loving sponsor who just knew what he was dealing with, and I'm still feeling it out. I still have to remember just how I couldn't see it right in front of my face in the beginning, and just what you and I were just talking about.
Yeah.
It was everything but my alcoholism or my drinking, and it was all the problems that I came in with. It was that the police were messing with my business, and somebody had broken into my business, and the woman, and it's just all the stuff that comes along with what happens when you drink like I do. Your life falls apart, or mine did. And I know I'm not the only one, thanks to AA.
Yeah,
but
it's like somebody, you sit there, or if I throw it back, I'm sitting there, and some guy, some loving member that's been through this program, who has had the miracle happen for him, is trying to go, "Dan, hey man, we need to work on you and get you this," and I'm pointing, but her,
yeah,
and the job, and the parents,
Uh-huh.
and them damn kids, and and I'm doing all this, and he's sitting there just looking at me like, And what I do like to be humorous with my guys today, and hopefully can get them to laugh a little bit, because I think that's important now and again, and to remind them that with all those things they're pointing at, there's one common denominator amongst all those things.
Them. Yeah. Well, and that's the great part. Like, it's such a two-way street. I've got a good relationship with the guys that I sponsor today, and
me too, man.
With everything going on in the world today, it's so nice to have them call me and me able to call them, and us just talk, and it's nice to have people that you can talk to that you trust, and to be trustworthy. It's a really neat thing.
Yeah, I saw a girl post something the other day on Facebook. It said something, and she kind of it was in a closed recovery group on Facebook, and she said, "You've been practicing for this your entire recovery. These are the hard times. If you haven't had a hard time yet."
Oh, what a great way to put it.
Yeah, this is one of these hard times, and you
Yeah.
come out the other side of this, and your recovery's that much stronger, And every time you jump a hurdle in recovery, period, every time you have a challenge and you move through it with sobriety, then you're just that much stronger. And she brought it towards the end, and said, "I know I do feel for you newcomers and people who are trying to get sober right now, but you pull this off." And you can say, you got sober in one of the toughest times that we know of to get sober. And, and then what that is then you end up with some serious forged recovery that was earned through some tough stuff. And then, what are you going to say? I stumped my toe, I'm going to go have a beer.
Right.
Or,
Yeah. Or the newcomer comes in and says, "Yeah, but this is going on. Let me tell you about how I got sober during a pandemic."
Yeah. We were locked. We didn't even have face-to-face meetings, dude. We were doing everything on the internet, and I didn't have Wi-Fi.
Right.
I didn't have a cell phone. I had to borrow my mom's just to go to a meeting.
What a time to be alive.
Yeah, it is crazy times, man.
Yeah. So so I go off to this treatment center, and I remember the drive down there. I drank my last fifth of vodka.
So from here to Alabama.
From here to Alabama, I finished it in the parking lot, and I remember my parents saying, "Do you want us to pray something?" And I just sat there and said, "God, I hope you're real," because I tried quitting drinking on my own. I knew I couldn't do it. I knew I couldn't stay sober. I had everything that any normal person would have said, well, I'm done drinking if this happened. All of that stuff happened, and I still just couldn't quit. I couldn't stay quit, and I knew that. There was no doubt in my mind that left to my own devices, I could not stay sober. So I go into this treatment center, and I sobered up. After a couple days of not drinking, there was no more booze in my body, right? And they gave me some stuff to keep me from shaking, and I was still shaky. But I kind of leveled out, and I just remember feeling miserable. Because now all I can do is sit there sober and think about the life I've destroyed. Because, I'm that guy growing up that had all this potential. And I, even drinking, I was able to do some things with my life, but it all just fell apart. Like I could never hold anything together. And I always knew that too. Like there was always that feeling of impending doom. Is today going to be that day? And finally that day happened, And so I'm sitting in treatment just thinking about this. And where do I go from here? I remember that being the biggest thought. Like, what is my life going to look like from here? Am I just going to try not to drink every day and hope that works? And treatment centers are funny places. A lot of the people just seem like they're on vacation. Like maybe they needed a couple weeks off from snorting Xanax before they just go back at it. And I thought, am I too far gone? Like, are they able to help some people, but a guy like me is just too far gone? And they brought a guy in that was a counselor there that was also in AA. And he was this big dude, and he was real loud. And he goes, guys, today we're going to talk about the steps. Step 1, you're fucked. And he yelled it real loud. And I can honestly say that was the first thing I ever heard in AA I could relate to. Because I knew somebody knew how I felt. For as much as I appreciate treatment centers and counselors and all that, none of them said anything that made any sense to me until this guy yelled that. And I thought, he knows what I'm going through. Maybe I'm not too far gone. And he went on to say the other 11 steps would get me out of that. And I didn't know how, and it didn't make any sense to me. But I do remember him saying, go to a meeting every day and get a sponsor, and the sponsor will take you through the steps. And if that's all I left treatment with, that was all I needed to leave treatment with. I left treatment, and my mom dropped me off at the old Jeff Token Club before they leveled it to build a bridge. Yeah. And she dropped me off on a Sunday night, and I know it was a Sunday night because I walked into what's my home group now. It meets 7:30 on Sunday nights at the Serenity House in Jeff. And I walked in and I sat down, and it wasn't the first meeting I'd ever been to, but it was the first meeting that I was like voluntarily going to that I knew I needed, and I was nervous to be there. And I sat down, and it was just a handful of old dudes. And they told me get some coffee, and I did. And I'm already shaky, so now I'm drinking coffee, and I'm shakier and nervous. And it goes around the room, and it was a discussion meeting, which is always been my favorite kind of meetings. And so it just went around the table, and they talked about their day or their recovery or what they were grateful for or any issues they were having. And it got around to me, and I said, I'm Nate, I'm an alcoholic, and I think I've hit my lowest bottom yet. And they said, well, good, just keep coming back. And I did. I went to a meeting every day, and it was the highlight of my day. I had nothing going on in my life at this point. I was in my parents' basement. My vehicle was still parked in a parking garage in Cincinnati because I had titled it in somebody else's name because of my license was suspended in Cincinnati, and I couldn't title it in my name and drive it. So that whole just the wreckage I'd created. So it was the highlight of my day.
Yeah, that game we play to keep things going.
Yeah, yeah. Looking back,
I put my car in somebody else's name.
Yeah, of course. Then I get
that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, I get sober, and then I try to track the car down and the guy whose name it's in, and he's like, "Oh no, my dad called for a duplicate title, and now it's in his name and all this stuff. And
so it just vanished.
yeah, it just vanished. So what my days looked like in early recovery was I would just kind of hang out at my parents' house, and I had all this nervous energy. Like my mind was going a million miles an hour all the time, and I couldn't stop it. It was October, and I was mowing their grass every day. I just needed something to do, right? And I couldn't wait till one of them got home, and I'd take one of their cars to an AA meeting, and I'd get there a half hour early, and I'd stay a half hour late, and it was the best 2 hours of my day.
Yeah.
You know, I
Like
felt
going to Lowe's today.
exactly. It was my lows in early recovery. You know,
I get it though. Because I mean, there was something in that energy or whatever it is, you know, and I would love to be able to like put some kind of reasoning behind that, but there is just something that goes, hey, I feel good while I'm here, you
Yeah.
know, and I'm looking forward to going. You know, who'd have thunk I'm going to be looking forward to that? My day's highlight is going to be when I get done with everything else I got to do today, and that meeting comes around, and I can go to it. And like you know, go early and hang out, talk to some people, and hell, maybe even go out with them afterwards and go sit at a coffee shop or a Waffle House, or
Yeah.
you know, and be okay during that time. You know, I think that's what my mind and everything told me, is that, you know, I'm okay in that window, and then my, you know, whatever my soul in there is going, yeah, this is good. This is good.
Yep.
You know, you're okay. Everything's good. There's no impending doom. You know, you're not talking to yourself quite as much as you do when you're home alone.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, my ego's always got in the way of even in my recovery. Like I've always had a hard time asking for help, or even telling people what's going on with me. So I would just stand there while they talked, and the things they were talking about were the things that were going on with me. So I would just sit there and listen. And fortunately, you know, I would at least be there with people that I knew were in the same boat I was in, and I wasn't alone, and it was going to be okay. And that was such a gift. To be able to have that, and to know I was going to be okay.
Yeah, Earl says that's the way he would hijack a conversation. He wouldn't participate in it, but he would jump into other people's conversation and just be a part of it without saying a word.
Sure, yeah. And we stood outside of the Jeff Token Club a lot of nights and just talked. And
one of my early meetings was there too, and I went to a few Jeff Token Clubs, because the Token Clubs around here was a place where you knew that you could go, you know, that it was a place of meeting was happening. Really wasn't so hit and miss as trying to, you know, and I don't know, I actually flipped gears in that over a period of time in recovery. For a while, I felt more comfortable in the Token Clubs and stuff, because I felt like there was some affiliation with the churches and the AA, even though they kept saying there wasn't.
yeah,
I still thought that, and plus I was playing sober too. So, like, I don't know, I felt like I was more liable to get caught playing sober in other AA meetings than I would be at a Token Club, because I thought, like, there's a bunch of us in here playing sober.
that's funny. So I kept going back to those meetings, and then just what you said, we started to go out to eat after meetings, and I was sitting across from a guy at a meeting one day, named John, and he goes, "Nate, what are you doing for money?" And I said, "I'm okay." My ego gets in the way of everything I do. He goes, "No, seriously, like, what are you doing for money? Do you have a job?" And I said, "No, but I'll be fine." And he goes, "Come work for me." And I said, "I'll figure something out." And he slides his number across to me, and I put it in my pocket, and I get home that night, and I think, I should probably call this guy. I have no money, and I have no job, and I'm living in my parents' basement. And so the next morning I call him, and he goes, "Come by my house." So I borrowed my mom's minivan, and I hated that. I was driving around on my mom's minivan with a semi-legal driver's license. Indiana didn't know about Ohio at the time, so I'm getting all that sorted out, and I drive over to his house, and I sit down, have a cup of coffee with him, and he said, "Nate, what have you done for a living in your life?" And I said, "Well, I've been in sales most of my life." And he goes, "Oh, good. You've sold cars?" And he's a contractor, right? So I think he wants me to start selling jobs for him. And I said, "Yeah, I sold cars." And he goes, "Good. And you know how to wash one. Why don't you go out and wash my trucks?" And he goes, "And then get in your mom's minivan and go start hanging door hangers on doors in the neighborhood and see if you can't drum us up some business." So I started just doing odd and end jobs for this guy, and I showed up every morning, and he paid me every Friday, and And before I know it, I've got money in my pocket, right? Because I'm not drinking and spending it on cocaine, and I'm showing up for work every day, and I start to have a routine to my day, and it started to feel really good, like waking up and going to work, and then I'd get off work and I'd go right to an AA meeting, and then I'd come home and eat some dinner and watch a TV show and go to bed, and I started to have a routine in my life that was good, and it felt really good, and I kept doing it, and I was going to these same meetings every day, and this guy named Bob, Bob was my first sponsor, and Bob would share, and he seemed so calm and cool and collected and sober, and I thought I want to be like he looks like he feels, and I wanted to ask him to sponsor me, and for some reason I was scared that he would say no. I don't know what made me think that just that fear of rejection. And I thought, if he says no, I'll have hurt feelings and I can't drink. And so I kept putting it off, and finally Bob grabbed me after a meeting one night, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Nate, I see you at a lot of meetings, and that is great." He said, "But if you want to stay sober and you want your life to change, it's going to take some work." And he goes, "The work I'm talking about is the 12 steps." And I asked him to take me through the steps, and he said he would. And he set a time and date for us to meet. I think it was a Thursday at 4 o'clock. And I showed up at 4, and he showed up at 4, and he goes, "Nate, that's the next right thing." And, I'm going to meetings, and I'm hearing him talk about do the next right thing, do the next right thing. And I needed somebody to tell me what the next right thing was. He said, "Being where you say you're going to be is the next right thing." And I thought I did something right.
Yeah.
I'm all excited about it. And Bob gave me his little sponsorship spiel at the beginning. I didn't realize at the time that's what it was. I thought he was just being kind of harsh. He goes, "Nate, I'm not going to chase you around Jeffersonville. I'm not going to be your loan officer or your relationship expert." He said, "I'm not going to share my opinions with you. That'll get us both drunk." He said, I'm gonna share my experience with you right out of the big book and show you how my sponsor took me through the steps." And then he said, "I'm going to show you precisely how I recovered." And I remember thinking, that's a pretty powerful statement, right?
It is a very powerful statement.
And then he opened up the big book to page 84. And he goes, "We read the 9th step promises at the beginning of most meetings, but these are the 10th step promises, and I want you to read these out loud." And he had me read the 10th step promise out loud, which promised me I wouldn't have to fight alcohol anymore. It talks about being placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected, the problem being removed. And I remember reading it and getting goosebumps and thinking, yeah, right. That's an amazing promise, but that can't happen to me. I'm too far gone. And he goes, "Nate, there's good news and bad news for that promise." And I think here it is. He goes, "The good news is that's available for anyone who walks through the doors of AA. The bad news is you got to do the first 9 steps first." And we got started in the steps and the doctor's opinion. And Bob told me to read the doctor's opinion, and then he asked me 3 questions. The first one was, am I alcoholic? And if yes, why? Like, what makes me think I'm alcoholic? The second one is, can I stay sober for good on my own? And the third one was am I willing to go to any length for victory over alcohol and a better life? And so I read the doctor's opinion, and I just remember reading it, and my brain was so scrambled at the time. It took me a week to read the doctor's opinion. It's what, 10 pages, and it took me forever to get through it. But I do remember, as I went through it, seeing parts of my drinking in black and white and being amazed that was me. And we met back up, and he said, "Are you alcoholic?" And I said, "Yeah, I know I'm alcoholic." And he said, "Why? What makes you think I'm alcoholic?" And I told him about the allergy that the doctor's opinion talked about, that when I take a drink, it sets something off in me, and I keep drinking. And if I'm not drinking, all I can think about is drinking. And he said, "Yeah, that certainly makes you alcoholic." He said, what are you going to do about it? Can you stay sober for good on your own? And I said, "No, I've tried. I can't." And he said, "Good. Are you willing to go to any length for victory over alcohol and a better life?" And I said, "Yeah, Bob, I'm willing to do anything, go to any length." And he said, "Can you lift 150 pounds? And I thought, this son of a bitch is going to ask me to help him move. And Bob looks at me, and I said, "Yeah, I could lift 150 pounds. And he goes, "Good. Pick up that 150-pound phone and call me every Sunday." He said, "Just tell me how your week's gone, and we'll talk about whatever step work you're on." And so we started going through a chapter at a time, and I would read it, and we'd talk about it. And until I got to the chapter How It Works, and he told me to start writing down my resentments, people I was mad at, and for me that was actually difficult. Like, I was the most mad at myself. I could find every reason I was mad at myself, but as I thought about why I was mad at myself, then I started to think about everybody else I was mad at. So I ended up with this long list of resentments and people I'm mad at, and he said, good. Let's meet up and get started on a fourth step. So I've read up to that point in the book, and we meet up to do a fourth step. And I remember being at a meeting shortly, a few days before that, and this fellow named Steve says, if you don't remember your third step prayer, you didn't do one. And I thought, this guy who's been sober 27 years, my sponsor, doesn't know what he's doing. I haven't done a third step prayer yet, and we're getting ready to start a fourth step. I don't know if this is going to work for me. So we meet up, and again, I don't say anything, right? I'm thinking all this stuff, but I don't say any of it to him. And Bob has me read in the big book after the How It Works. We read at the beginning of meetings, being convinced we're at step 3, and then it starts talking about the third step and why I'm going to do a third step, because running my life didn't work. And I could easily concede that, because I ended up living in my parents' basement with no money and the police looking for me, and broke and unhappy, and everything you would not want out of life is exactly what I had at that point, right? Yep. So it was really easy for me to concede that running my own life wasn't working. We get to that third step prayer, and he got on his knees and he put his hand out, and I got on my knees and I grabbed his hand and I said that third step prayer. And we got back in our chairs, and I made that decision to turn my will and life over to the care of God in the form of a decision and a prayer. And he told me he was going to sponsor me out of the big book, right? So he points to the next paragraph and he said, now read this. And the paragraph after that talks about that's a big step, and a lot of us have feel the effect of that immediately. Turning my will and life over to the care of God. But, and there's a big but there, it won't last unless followed by vigorous action. And he goes, that's the fourth step. The vigorous action is the fourth step. He said that was a big step, but it won't last unless it's followed by action. And just what you talked about at the start of this, getting down to the causes and conditions, what's actually wrong with me. Because it's not the drinking. The drinking's what got me to that point of surrender, but that's not what's wrong with me. Vodka is not what's wrong with me. Right. I've got a spiritual malady. There's something inside me that was messed up long before that first beer in that nightclub, and that's why that first beer in that nightclub ignited something in me. Yeah. That's why it answered. It was an answer, because there was a problem that needed an answer, and now we're going to figure out what that is. And I'm so grateful for a sponsor who laid that out and would point that stuff out to me. And he was so good at doing it. He never told me anything. He'd lead me to it, which is the best thing you can do for an alcoholic. He made me think I came up with it, and I had no idea what was happening, but still somehow believed I was coming up with these answers. And so we read on through the big book and why we're doing this inventory and getting down to the resentments that I've held on to my whole life. So I start writing these out, and he starts showing me how they've affected me, how they've affected my self-esteem and my security and my ambition and my pocketbook, my relationships with other people, my relationships with women. And it was easy with his help to identify how those things, those people I was mad at for various things that had happened to me in my life affected me. And I get through doing all that, and I got to see how a lot of my resentments had affected me in the same way, whether it be a girl leaving or a person dying or somebody firing me or me doing something that made me mad at myself. It would affect me in the same way. I remember
those patterns show up, and by the time you boiled it down, you X amount of people on that list, or X amount of whatever, people, institutions, and principles. Mm-hmm. And then if you could put them in buckets, you might have 5 buckets. Yeah. It's all the same thing happening over and over and over again.
It was all the same thing. And I even asked him that. I'm like, this is starting to seem repetitive. I'm just writing the same stuff. And he goes, just keep writing. and I would say, I think I've let some of these go. He goes, oh, write those down too. And so I wrote it all down. I didn't want to get drunk again, right?
Yeah.
So
I had a sponsor call me tonight saying something about, that these, because I say to pray before you do the work. I ask people to sit down and ask God to help you find these names and whatnot.
Yeah.
And this person said, well, you know, when I was doing that, some names come up, but I just don't think they need to be on the list. Well, what makes you think that? You know, and they're just going on to say, but let me ask you, did you pray? Did you pray that prayer I told you to pray before you started this, that the God gives you the names that needs to be on here? And she said, oh, yeah, I did that. I said that prayer. And I said, so you already not trusting, you know, here we are back at not trusting the higher power that's giving you, know, these answers. You asked for the answers, they were provided, and now you're going to balk at writing them down. Now, I'd say it with a smile, and they hear me joking around too, so they laugh. But, you know, we have a way of dodging and weaving and wanting to, I'm like, I wish I could get, like, put a star by those names. Because I want to know what they are later. Let's just see what they might be.
Yeah,
you might have left off the list.
Yep. And so he helped me. He helped me do all that and get that written out. And then we looked at our part. Or the big book says we look for our faults and in those resentments, and where I'd been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and afraid. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't see that in a lot of them. He helped me see it. I remember one of the first ones was a woman I had dated, and she had cheated on me. And I said, where's my fault in this? Where was I selfish? And he goes, did you stay with her? I said, yeah. He goes, well, you put up with unacceptable behavior. He said, you can't see where that's selfish? And I'm like, holy shit, I'd never looked at it that way. He goes, you were using her. She made you feel better, so you stayed with her even when she didn't treat you right. And I'm like, oh my God. I started to see things in my life for what they really were, not for what I had imagined them in my head. Right. And something about writing a 4-step, some magic happened to me where I really just started to see things. And with the help of a good sponsor who'd done it himself with a good sponsor. And I start writing these resentments in my part in them, and seeing the fear that backed up a whole lot of it. You know, whether it was fear of being alone or fear of being found out, or whatever the fear was in all this stuff. I was able to see it, and so I get through with all this, and I called Bob and. I said, I'm done with this 5th step. I did my part. I did the sex inventory, 4th step, and the fear inventory and all that. And he goes, good. Read the 5th step in the big book. And I know why he had me do that, because the only thing out of all those pages I read that I got was if I didn't tell him everything, there was going to be no point in telling him anything. And I had still had those 3 or 4 secrets that I was kind of on the fence about whether I was going to share with him or not. And I trusted Bob, but I have this ego problem that wouldn't let me tell him about some stuff. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have to tell him all this stuff. So the morning that we had scheduled to do a 5th step to meet up and do it, I wrote those 3 or 4 take to the grave secrets down, and I took that binder and stuck those in the back and hoped we wouldn't get to them, and sat down with him, and I went through this 4th step with him, and he started laughing and told me similar things he had done, and I got through all of it, and when I got done with it, Bob looked at me and he goes, Nate, you did a good job. And he had me write a prayer at the top of each page too, just asking God to help me to be honest and thorough. And he goes, Nate, you did a good job on that. And he said, you know, you were honest and thorough. And he said, that's all you need to be. He said, I've seen great 4 steps, I've seen bad 4 steps. He goes, but if they were honest and thorough, God honors that, and you're going to stay sober. And I remember just getting this feeling like, I might stay sober. You know, it was this amazing revelation that it might be possible for me to actually stay sober permanently one day at a time. And I stood up from doing that 5th step, and I went home, and he sent me home to do steps 6 and 7. And, you know, it was just 2 paragraphs in the big book. He told me to have an hour where I could sit quiet, and if I'm honest, I may have sat quiet for half an hour, and did just what steps 6 and 7 told me to do. You know, I reviewed the first 5 and made sure I didn't leave anything out, and it was solid. And then I just kind of meditated on that 4th step I just done and 5th step I just done, and then I did the 7th step prayer. And if I were to give a suggestion to somebody, I would tell them spend that hour, because I may have shortchanged myself because I was still just wound so tight from doing that 5th step that I couldn't sit still. I still sometimes have problems with sitting still, and but I put in my half hour. I did that 7th step prayer, and I really liked the 7th step prayer because it was asking God to use me, the good and the bad. And I've just told a guy all my deep dark secrets that I've been ashamed of my whole life. And I woke up that next morning, and for the first time in as long as I can remember, my mind was quiet. It's like that committee in my head didn't have any ammunition left.
Right.
And it was such a wonderful feeling. That I could have told anybody that fifth step. I could have gone to my neighbor and knocked on the door and told them that. I was that free of it.
Yeah.
And it was amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
I have a God, higher powers, given me some gifts and some things that I'm just thankful for today. And I take guys down to that cabin and do fifth steps with them, and we spend the night. And I swear to God, no kidding, every time I wake up in the next morning with a guy who looks different than the guy who I went to bed with that night before.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a physical change. There's a change in their demeanor and stuff, how they look overnight. And I have them do 6 and 7 down there, and I go on to bed. And most time they'll go out and do it under the stars and outside and do their 7-step prayer outside. Most people choose to do that. I give them some options. They want to do it here or whatever. Doesn't make any difference to me. It's yours. But no, I'm gonna be up there with my headphones on, and I'm gonna be listening. I'm gonna be sleeping 3.2 seconds. So first off, I'm not gonna hear anything.
Yeah.
You're welcome to do it out loud, however you want to do it. I am not, but yeah, there's some, all this stuff has got some magic, like you said. That 4th step, there's something about that, about writing and putting that stuff down that does that, and then that 5th step and followed up by 6 and 7 is a dramatic change for folks, and it certainly had that kind of impact on me too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing, and man, I'm so grateful for that. So I called Bob, and I said, man, I feel a lot better. And he said, well, I'm going to give you a couple weeks off, and then I want you to start reading steps 8 and 9 in the big book. And he did. He gave me 2 weeks off, and then I started reading steps 8 and 9, which is making a list of people I'd harmed and then making amends. And once I'd read that, and he had me read it in 12 and 12, and he said, now start making a list of people you've harmed. And I'm still going to work every day, and I'm making friends in AA, and I'm going out to eat. We started on Friday nights after a 5 o'clock meeting that we all went to. We'd go out to eat somewhere, and then we started doing a few other nights a week. And before I know it, I've got things going on a lot of nights a week, and I'm working a lot, and I'm going to a meeting every day, just about every day. Sometimes work and run late or something like that, and I wouldn't make it, but that was the core of my life, and so I'm meet up with them to start my amends process, and he helped me identify how I had harmed people, because even though I did a 4-step and I got to see my faults and my resentment, sometimes I still couldn't quite identify how I'd harmed people, and he helped me see out of the 12 and 12 when it talks about how we harm people. At the bottom of page 80, it talks about what kind of harms do we do to people, and it talks about robbing people not just of their worldly goods, but of their emotional security and peace of mind. And that one hit me hard. I'm like, those nights where I didn't come home to my significant other or to my parents or whoever it was that cared about me, that wondered where I was. What did I rob them of? Those sleepless nights they had to go through, or the wondering why their son keeps going to jail, or why their boyfriend keeps going to jail, or whatever it is. The stuff that I had put people through, and then there were the easy ones. I knew there were people that I had just physically stolen money from. They may not have even known it. They just may have known their business struggled when I managed it. And I've always been a salesman. I was really good at putting on a show and making things look good. Like, business was good. However, I was still robbing them. And they knew something was off, but they could never put their finger on it. So I make this list of amends, and Bob said, make some of the easy ones. Make the ones to your family and some friends and things like that. And he said, I want you to write the amends out before you do it. I want you to call me before you make it. And then I want you to let me know how it went. And I started doing that. And he said, we write it out so that we don't just go off the cuff and start doing what we've always done and apologizing and then lying. And before we know it, we didn't accomplish what we hoped to accomplish. Yep. And so that's what he had me do. And I would write it out. And there were some people that would say, well, that seems scripted. But thank you, it got the job done. I didn't realize most of his wording was right out of the book. He would have me say something like, I need a minute of your time because I'll never go over drinking for good till I've done my utmost to straighten out my past. And over the years that I worked for you, I stole money from you. And that was how I would open it up. And then I'd go through that list of, I robbed you of emotional security and peace of mind and things like that. And I'd get done and I'd say, I regret the harms I've done. What can I do to make it right? And I was amazed how many people looked at me and said, I don't want anything from you. I'm so glad you're doing better.
Yep.
We thought you were dead, or things like that, So I got done with a bunch of amends, and because I was going to work and making some money, I was able to start paying off some creditors. The state of Ohio was sending some very aggressive letters to my parents' house, wanting taxes for the 3 years I was in business that I didn't. If you're in a retail business, you're supposed to collect sales tax, and I didn't, and they knew that, and so they were threatening me, and I was able to. Yeah, I was able to. Bob said you can negotiate with these people. He said call and tell them what's going on, and they made terms with me and let me pay them off, and I spent like a year negotiating with these people, and finally the guy says, how about this? Send me an email and tell me why that's all you can pay and how much you can pay. And I sent him an email and told him what I was doing. I told him I'm in recovery, that I used to have a drinking problem, and this is part of my amends, and here's how much I can pay. And it was a chunk of change. And they sent back an email and said, we'll accept that, send it today. And I did. And I remember feeling this instant sense of relief, and then I was pissed. I was like, that's a lot of money for nothing. And I called my sponsor, and he's like, thank God for good sponsorship. He starts laughing at me. He goes, well, Nate, that was never your money to begin with.
Yeah, right.
And so I was able to do that, and I got done with a big chunk of amends. And then there was a handful of amends that I had to go back to Cincinnati to make. The people that I'd worked for, that I'd robbed, some landlords who I just left holding the bag, so some people that had worked for me, and a woman who the last thing she had told me is she might be pregnant. So I didn't want to make these amends, right? Oh, and the detective that was looking for me. So I keep putting it off and keep putting it off. And I said, Bob, I know I have to do this to stay sober, but I am not willing. And Bob said, pray for the willingness. And I started praying for the willingness. And I woke up one day and I said, today I'm going to go make the amends. And I got in a car and I drove to Cincinnati, and I had them all written out, and I didn't know where these people would be. And I went looking for them, and they were just there, like one after the next after the next. It was amazing. And the same deal. Like, I told them what I had done and asked what I could do to make it right. And they didn't want anything from me. The woman wasn't pregnant. The detective had retired. The businessmen who had stolen from for years said, we're just glad you're doing better. And I said, are you sure you don't want something from me to balance the books? And they said, no. It's water under the bridge, but we're glad you're doing better. And I left.
A lot of responses are, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And I left feeling like I was floating on air. Yeah. I mean, I was all that guilt was gone. All that worry that the people were going to find me was gone.
We talk about a backpack that you're carrying around that you're just throwing all your life experiences in, and the majority of mine were where I was, a lot of them were things I'd done bad. Mm-hmm. There's some good stuff in there too, but the good stuff, the whole negative bias thing, just same thing. If you walk in a room and 30 people say you're looking good tonight, and one person says you ain't looking so good, you go home and think about the one person that said you wasn't looking good, and same thing with this stuff that we put in our conscience.
Yeah.
These events, so all that negative bias piles up on you. And, and I can, obviously, I think I stole it from Scott Lee or something. I'm carrying it around with me all the time. And I can smell it. Mm-hmm. I can smell it. And what to worry about, I get so close to you, you'll be able to smell it too.
Yep.
But through this process, I get to clean that can out, right? Yeah. And I get to clean it out with some pretty good stuff, and I got to smell back there now, and it smells pretty good, pretty fresh and clean. And you get all that wreckage cleaned up, and you go around there and repair all that stuff, man. And you travel lighter. Mm-hmm. You do. Your being is lighter. You feel better. You look better. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to. There is an element, even though you probably don't think. I had some people I was worried about catching me. I'd done some things to some people that weren't happy. And at one point in my life, had they caught me, they'd done some damage to me.
Yeah.
And to clean those things up, Now I don't have to look over my shoulder anymore.
Yeah.
I don't have to peek down the aisle at the Lowe's to see who's down that aisle before I walk down it.
Yeah.
So it's amazing work when you go out there, and it's unreal how many people let us off the hook.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how I knew I had a good sponsor. When I headed to Cincinnati, he said, "Call me if you need bail money." I said, "I got the right guy."
Yeah.
What a gift. And shortly thereafter, Bob passed. I was 3.5 years sober. He was 30 years sober, and he passed sober. But he asked me shortly before that happened, he goes, "Nate, what would you do if something happened to me?" I said, "Well, I guess I'd get another sponsor, Bob." And he goes, "Yeah, that's what I'd want you to do." And then a few months later, he passed. And he didn't say anything like he might have been sick and thinking he might go, but he did. And so I got another sponsor, and my sponsor now is named Ed, and me and him have been sponsee for 5 years and change, and it's a good relationship we have. He actually just called while you and I were sitting here talking.
Did he?
So yeah, he checks in on me just like I check in with him. And
What's his first initial on his last name?
Ed M. Yeah,
You gotta know him.
yeah, probably.
Usually in a suit.
Yep, he's always in a suit, and he looks kind of like Bill W.
Yeah, I know Ed.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
Yeah, really good dude.
Yeah, I'm grateful for him in my life, and him and a few other mentors that I have in the program who've been sober and longer than me, and I want what they have. And
Yeah.
you know, it's important for me to have guys in my life I can bounce things off of, that I trust, that it doesn't leave that phone call or room, and I'm able to just be honest and open with a few people in my life about whatever happens. Because you know, one of the things about staying sober is life still happens, and I still do stupid things sober that I have to call a guy and say, "All right, you know what I just did at 8 years sober?" And they'll laugh at me and say, "All right, so here's how you should probably make amends for that, or here's how you should probably not make amends for that," or whatever the case may be. But,
The other thing it says in that, when you said that he had you read that fifth step in there, there's a line that says you must be entirely honest with somebody if you're going to live.
yeah,
I think it says, can't remember exactly, but it says something about to live with a happy life. You have to be totally honest with somebody. Completely, entirely, I think it's the word it says. Entirely.
I think it is entirely. And
I like how a lot of those, I wanted to think entirely didn't mean all the way.
Right.
And like when in the beginning of how it works when it says completely and thoroughly and absolutely. Like they don't really mean.
Yeah.
They're just using really strong language to make the point. They don't really mean all, not completely.
Yeah, this seems
Not
very
really
all-in type of
thoroughly.
language.
Yeah. It can't mean that.
Yeah, and that wasn't a one-time shot. I have to continue to do that.
Yeah,
and,
right.
And sometimes I'll do it kicking and screaming, but
it is great to have. The fellowship is just so much to
Yeah.
me. It's just unreal to have the friends that I have around me today. It just, I will tear up thinking about it because it just means that much to me, man. I got people I can call on at any time, and I'm a guy who you can call on at any time.
Yeah.
That was not who I used to be, and I used to not have those people around me either. Not
Right.
outside of I've always been able to call my dad and he would come help me.
yeah.
But he lives with me. He's here. I get to some of my. I don't really like the living amends word for some reason. I've rejected it at some level, but I think it's the same as 12 steps. I think it's practicing these principles. But part of my paying back to that dude who's taken such good care of me and always had my back is that we're roommates now, and since Mom passed a few years ago, he don't have to be alone, and
Yeah.
we get to buddy around out here in the wood shop, and he's a jack of all trades and a crackerjack when it comes to fixing stuff, and that's where I got it. And so I can job talk to him, and he likes it. I can go up there and say, "Hey, I got a project gonna be doing this," and we'll jack around talking about what a guy might do to deal with that situation.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. The contractor that I worked for nearly 8 years was a roofing contractor, and my dad has been in commercial roofing nearly my whole life. And so the same thing happened. I'm staying with them, and we're both in the roofing business. So we get to, I get to come home at night and talk shop with my dad,
Right.
and it's those little just funny coincidences
Right.
That start happening when I stay sober and I'm present.
If I need an extra hand, I try to do one-man stuff. I'm just trying to do, I'm not looking to have employees or anything. And all that drive for success that I had at one point in my life, I don't really care about much anymore. I want to pay the bills and do okay and make sure kids have what they need and things like that. But if I need an extra set of hands, I'll drag Pops along with me, and
Yeah.
and customers just love the crap out of that, they
Sure.
bring Dad, because something, I can't work him all day, but if I just need another set of hands, sometimes there's a lot of things you just need another guy set of hands for a little bit.
Yeah.
Hold this while I screw this in,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
and so that's fun, and he likes it too. So it's a blessing. It's another thing, the coincidences or whatever, that I get to have that guy in my life today the way that we are. And we've always been really good friends. I mean, we've always, no matter what, he's always had my back. And I grew up hunting and fishing with him and chasing along behind him and doing these kind of odd jobs when I was a little kid. I don't remember, and I've asked him about that. I don't remember. He would say, he'd have a buddy that had a washing machine that was out, or so and so needs a receptacle put in this living room wall or whatever. Dad said, "Hey, come give me a hand while we go over to so and so's house and do this." And I remember having a little bit of rejection if I was supposed to meet my friends or something, a little mental like,
Yeah.
But I don't ever remember like complaining about it. I remember just going. And while you're there, you watch. When like he's distracted with the telephone or anything like that when I was a kid.
Right.
I take my son with him. I got to tell him to leave the phone in the car. Or else every time I turn my back on him, he's got it out looking at it. But I paid attention to that stuff, and I think about today. There's a story I tell where we were fixing putting a new motor in a washing machine for somebody, and now they just got integral plugs, right? Everything just got a plug on the end of it that heats up, so you buy this motor for this GE model such and such, and you got to unbolt and everything, the other one, but the electric, you just unplug it and plug it back in.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't used to do that. You had to cut the wires and connect them back up again, You had all them colors. And Dad's colorblind. He's a colorblind electrician. That's probably one of the things. He's an electrician, maybe
Oh,
more
wow.
than anything else. And I still remember, he'd take me with him, and he'd be going, "What color's this? Are these two the same color?" Boy, later on in life, I thought, boy, if a homeowner would have been maybe
Right.
listening to that, wanting to know what color things was, they may not have been so hopped up about having that guy fix stuff. But I've learned to fix stuff. He taught me how to do it all my life, and I just it's just continue to get recovery miracles and be able to see them for what they are and be able to take part in them and be a useful person today.
Yeah. And I get to do the same thing for my parents today, and it's great. And they're always like, "What can we give you? What do we owe you?" And I'm like, "No, I want to do this for you." And they're like, "Well, we got to give you something." So my mom, she's so great. She made me a mask or bought me a handmade mask or whatever. And she just does little things. She knows I like avocados, so I'll go by and help them with something, and then she'll hand me a bag of avocados.
Yeah.
And, they're so sweet. I'm so grateful for them.
Yeah, I was able to. My mom died shortly after that first birthday. The very next month. It was February of that year. Probably when I was celebrating that 1 year. It was February the 7th of 2016, so it happened to be Super Bowl Sunday. But I'm grateful that I got through this work and was able to make amends with my mom before she passed. And I'm still not sure my dad gets it completely. He goes to my sobriety birthdays and thanks those guys, and they know that camp we have out there is really because of him. And they all enjoy it, so they're thanking him for doing that. And I've heard him say some people have told me, that he's thanked my friends for what they've done for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not while I'm watching, but they tell me later on, and I'm glad I was able to do that. I spent my entire first year of sobriety pretty much on home incarceration.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for 9 months of it. I was sentenced to a year, but they let me off 3 months early. And I'm still on day reporting for the remainder of my 1-year sentence, where I had to call into a corrections officer every day.
Wow.
But hell, I've been calling my sponsor every day anyway, so I just tack that on the end of that phone call, and double two for it every day. Called them both. And most time it was just her voicemail and stuff too, so I didn't ever, and I liked her really well, but it wasn't. I just had to check in with her. That's something I had to do as a condition of my probation, I guess it was. It really wasn't as in between, because once I got done with that, then I had to actually go on probation. But Dad stayed with me. Yeah, I mean, he did everything all the way through. Anything I needed to be done, he did. And he had a big fall. He got sick. He had a tumor taken off of his pituitary gland, which about wrecked his pituitary gland during that time. My mom had a stroke in my first year of recovery. There was a whole bunch of things that went by that was a real pull.
Mm-hmm.
But you do this stuff with that. So what I'm circling back to was that there's just no way I could have really done that stuff. But I had a bunch of guys that had their arms underneath of me.
Yeah.
Carrying me through that.
Yeah.
And no matter what, they were with me.
Yeah.
And I try to be that guy today. Yeah. And when things are going, I have a really, really good friend whose son passed away last night from this disease.
Yeah.
You know who?
Yeah.
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 And I sponsored that guy for a little bit.
Yeah.
Last fall. And I try to be there for those people today.
Mm-hmm.
That paying this thing forward. And man, I guess we just had to continue to get I don't like to say this, but you don't have to be around here long before you get reminded this thing's deadly.
Yeah.
And if you forget, it's just a couple of days later before you're going to get reminded again.
Yep.
If you keep your eyes open and you stay connected anyway. Never knew death like I know it since I come here.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So when I started that amends process, my sponsor had me start reading steps 10 and 11 every day to kind of keep me in the steps on a daily basis.
Yep.
And I'm such a slow study. I didn't even know what was happening. I'd call him like we agreed every week, and we'd talk about football, and then he'd say, "Are you reading steps 10 and 11 every day?" And I'd say, "Yeah," which meant I was reading them, at least a couple days a week. And then I'd call him to complain about something, and he'd say, "Well, you just 10th step to that." And I think, "Oh, I did?" And then he'd say, "Well, it doesn't sound like you own amends or anything. You watching that game tonight?" And I would think, what does that have to do with anything? Or are you going to your home group tonight? And I would think, what does that have to do with what we were just talking about? And he was just helping me turn my thoughts to something else, like the book talks about. And so when I got to that point, I said, "Bob, can I start sponsoring guys?" And he goes, "Yeah, you've got experience in all the steps. You can start sponsoring guys." And like the next day, a guy asked me to sponsor him, and I was so excited. I called Bob, and he said, "Well, you asked for it." So he said, "Just do with him what I did with you. Just carry the message." And so I gave the guy my phone number, and he never called, and I never saw him again. And I called Bob, and I said, "What'd I do wrong?" And he goes, "Nothing." He goes, "All you can do is be there. You can't get them drunk. You can't get them sober." And that took the pressure off of me. Like, all I have to do is say, "Hey, this is what my sponsor did with me, and it worked. I'll do this with you, and it'll work if you want it." And it's as simple as that. I don't have to come up with answers to all the problems and stuff like that.
Right.
Bob was just always like, "Hey, just always take it back to a step." It's as simple as that for me. But nothing... Besides freeing me of everything, nothing in the first 11 steps did for me what the 12th step has done, passing it along, as far as giving me some feeling of belonging to the world and being a part of stuff, and so just some feeling of fulfillment, knowing that maybe something I do helps somebody else the way that somebody helped me. Yeah. When I wake up in the morning, and let me just say, like, my life has gotten so much better since I got sober. I had always dreamt of flipping houses and having like a real estate investment company. I didn't think that would be possible, but as I worked for this contractor and paid my bills and paid creditors and stuff, my credit started getting good. I didn't think I'd ever have good credit. Like, I was one of those drunks whose credit was so far beyond shot, it didn't look salvageable. But I just picked away at it over the years, and it started getting good. And I started getting letters in the mail where they were offering me money, and I got a home loan, and I bought a house. And I bought a house that was a foreclosure, and it was distressed. And I did almost all the work myself in the off season, because he was a roofing contractor, right? And he gave me a promotion to sales, and I'm selling roofs. And then in the wintertime when we're not selling any roofs, I'm working on the house, and I sell it and I make a profit, and I buy another one and I do it again, and then I after working for him for 8 years, I said, John, I think I'm gonna do this on my own. I'm gonna just start my own real estate investment company. And he said, well, will you stay on through the rest of the year? And I did. I put in a 6-month notice basically, and stayed on through the year, and then went out on my own, and have been for about a year now, and it's doing really well. And I say that because a lot of the stuff that happens today, I can't imagine would have ever happened to me. Like my life is the stuff that I always dreamt of. It literally is the stuff I had always dreamt of. And it's not because I'm out chasing it. It just seems to happen when I'm putting the most important thing first, when I'm putting my recovery in AA first. The rest of the stuff seems to just keep panning out.
Fall in place.
Yeah. And that's not to say like every day is just amazing.
But the long haul, the trend is towards the better.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no real reason why that, again, this stuff is hard to put our arm around.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is I have you to look at and a number of other people. So I can't just say it's a fluke, right?
Right.
I can't, I would like to just look at one person and say that's baloney.
Yeah.
But there's too big a sample going on. And I watch people, and then when you were talking about the 12-step work, when you actually get to actually have a hand in watching that happen, like I think of it as the old thing of the tool in the master's hand kind of thing. I get to be an instrument or a channel for this stuff because somebody else handed it to me, and frankly, I have a feeling today that that's a gift that was given to me. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of spit in the face not to carry it on.
Yeah.
I almost feel like I have a responsibility as having received a gift to now give it away. And the book says that over and over again too.
Yeah.
If it's right about a lot of other things, and it says if you want to keep this thing,
yep.
here's what you do in order to keep it. And when you do that, and then you watch these guys whose lives get, because it's the same thing like you said, you kind of, I find out I had to bring them back, right? They're always all pointing to all the problems that they got. And frankly, I can't do anything about any of their problems, right? I might have a little piece of advice here or there, a little nugget maybe or something,
Mm-hmm.
I can listen to them. But what I found is if you just do this work, that stuff will clear up. Can't tell you how. I don't know what it will. But my experience is and I can actually say that as a guarantee today.
Yeah.
If you do this. Now, like you said, there's still going to be stumbling blocks. Life still happens. But the overall trend, that stuff's going to clear up, or it's not going to matter to you as much anymore. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. Maybe it didn't go away.
Yeah.
But I'm just okay with it now.
Mm-hmm.
Where it used to eat my lunch.
And that's where I have to get back into the steps. I remember when I started that 4th step with Bob, he said, I've done hundreds of mini 4th steps in the time I've been sober. And I didn't know what that meant until I needed some relief and had gone through the steps and I remembered what he had said, and I did one on whatever it was that was bugging me. I couldn't even tell you what it was now, and it worked.
Yep. That's essentially, to me, like a long-form 10.
Yeah.
Yeah,
same
sometimes
thing.
some problems don't require that much.
No.
They can just be call my sponsor or that kind of thing, and you can wash that out. But sometimes you got some stuff piled up, and that work, that's my sponsor will usually tell me that. Usually, he'll say, maybe we better do maybe we better inventory that, and we'll do that on this one, or these ones. Mm-hmm. And I use the same tools too. When somebody comes to me and they got because you can hear it's like, boy, you got a lot of pile of shit there going on, don't you? And it's not just one thing, but it seems to be wrapped up around one thing. Why don't you inventory that?
Yep. And then if I put off inventory in one thing, it starts to snowball into every aspect of my life. And before I know it, things I enjoy are pissing me off. And I have to get back into the solution.
Yeah. I never had a guidebook. I never had a way. I just didn't know. I just stumbled along forever and ever.
Yeah.
I just stumbled along like the pinball in the pinball machine, bouncing off of whatever happened to bump into me or I bumped into. I have no idea which way I was going to shoot off of it.
Sure.
And today I have some tools to do this journey on this big blue marble. I never had them. I have another friend said, or I heard this someplace else said, I don't know what grade it was. Seems like it was a 2nd or 3rd grade or whatever, but they were passing out the notebook on how to do this thing called life.
Right.
And I missed that day. Or I must have missed that day because I didn't get one. And now I have one.
Yeah, same here. Well, I heard a circuit speaker say something like he had a guidebook. He grew up in a religious family. And that was kind of my experience, except it just didn't feel like a guidebook to me. Like I still didn't feel like I fit in anywhere that I was. And I still felt like it just wasn't going to work. And that didn't look like any fun. Like I didn't want any part of that.
Right.
Until I needed a guidebook, and AA was there for me. And it gave me exactly what I needed, an action program. It had nothing to do with feeling or thinking or any of that stuff. It was just like, you do this, you'll get this. It's as simple as that.
Yep.
And I'm so grateful for that my sponsor said that, he said, I'm the kind of guy that's always getting ready to get ready, and this is going to take some action. And I thought, I'm that kind of guy too. When you were talking about inventorying things and going through things in life, at 6 years sober, I went through a breakup of a relationship that had lasted a couple years. And besides my first sponsor passing on, that hurt, my first sponsor passing on, and I went and cried at AA meetings because it hurt. And this breakup hurt. I knew it was the right thing for both of us. Like we agreed that it wasn't going to work, and we could see right in front of our faces the relationship wasn't working. But it was a relationship that we both cared about each other, and it lasted a couple years. And so I'm going through all this pain, and we had planned a trip to Maui, Hawaii, right? One of the neatest things about getting sober for me and going to work and all that stuff is that I've been able to travel, and drinking and everything. I really was never able to. I always had dreams of going places, but I never did that much, right? So I've got to travel all over the place, and I bought the tickets and paid for the resort and all this stuff to Maui, and then we split up, right? So I've got 2 tickets, and I'm like, well, I'm still going. So I get on a plane and fly out to Hawaii by myself, and I'm really excited to do it. But my alcoholism has a real way of telling me I'm alone, even sober sometimes. So I'm all excited. I get off this plane, and suddenly I get that hit to the heart, like, I'm alone. What am I going to do? I'm alone. And I Google AA meetings, and I find some AA clubs in Maui, Hawaii, right? And so the first night I'm there, I hit one of these clubs, and the people invite me to eat tacos, and I go out with them and eat tacos, and the breakup's still bothering me, right? And I'm in paradise. I'm in Hawaii, and it's beautiful, and I'm doing all the things I always wanted to do, right? I'm fishing off the beach. I'm snorkeling. I'm doing great things and hanging out with people at AA meetings every day. And I'm complaining to all of them about how I feel, right? I've never been one to be a real big AA meeting complainer, but I'm giving them hell. And in sharing my experience and really enjoying being a part of AA up there. And anyway, I'm such a disaster that I go to the gift shop at one of these Hawaiian, I was in Hawaii gift shops, and buy a little pad of paper with a hula girl on it and a pen with a hula girl on it, and I start writing inventory in a parking lot of a token club in Hawaii because I want to feel better, right? And it works. Like even in a situation like that, it works.
Yep.
It just gets me. It doesn't mean I stop thinking about it, but it means it doesn't own me.
Yep.
And I was able to move past it, at least for that day. And so toward the end of that trip, I asked the concierge, I'm like, I want to do something that's not touristy. I hike, and I want you to tell me somewhere to go that I can go hiking and be kind of out in the wilderness. He goes, I got just the place for you. He said, if you take the Hana Highway, he said, it's the other side of the island. It's a long highway along the coast. It's a beautiful drive. He said, you'll come to a bamboo rainforest. And he said, there's not going to be a sign. There's just going to be an opening in the bamboo, and you'll see some cars parked on the side of the road. He said, park on the side of the road, start walking through the hole in the bamboo. And he said, you'll hike along this path, and you'll come up to a stream. And he said, you'll see a few people out hiking, but if you follow the stream, you'll see less and less people, and you'll start to come up on a series of waterfalls. And he said, the first 3 waterfalls, you'll be able to climb up and follow the stream, and you'll still see people. He said, but after the 3rd waterfall, there's a big pool of water. You won't see people anymore, and keep following the stream. And he said, you're going to go to a back part of the rainforest, and you'll come up on 2 last waterfalls. And he said there will be a big pool of water between 2 cliffs. you can't get around this pool of water without swimming across it. But if you swim across this pool of water and climb the last waterfall, you'll come to a 70-foot waterfall. And I said, that's just the one for me, right? So I do just what he said, and I see the first 3 waterfalls. I stop seeing people. I go hiking. I'm by myself in the middle of this rainforest, right? And I come up on this big, dark, big pool of water between 2 cliffs. And I start thinking, this is how a lot of horror movies start, right? There's something living in this water. But I made it this far, and I want to do this, right? So I kick my flip-flops off, and I swim across this pool of water, and I climb that last waterfall, and I'm standing alone in this rainforest, and there's this big 70-foot waterfall, and it's beautiful. And I remember getting this feeling thinking about that 4th step I had done with Bob, and 2 of the things that scared me the most, one was being alone, and 2, and I thought it was stupid, was water I couldn't see the bottom of, right? And I realized that something that AA had done for me was allowed me to live life, like actually live life, not being held back by everything that was inside me that I couldn't deal with. And what a miracle what the program had done to me. And allowed me to live life, even going through some stuff and that kind of thing. I'm able to be a part of life today.
Yeah, that is a too cool story. I like that. I've heard you say that. I've heard you share that before, and that gives me goosebumps. That you get to go on some adventures here, and you're open for it, right? There have been a lot of times that maybe I had those opportunities around, but either it was interfering in my drinking, or I poo-poo it for some reason or another, sometimes it was just a sheer matter that it was your idea and it couldn't be worth a shit, right? So I'm not going to go out there and do that. It sounds like, I don't believe you that's actually out there, and not be able to be open to it. And today I almost have some childlike eyes today to where I can be optimistic about what's around the next corner, rather than fearful about what's around the next corner.
Yeah.
And you talked about it in 10th step promises where it says safe and protected. And I know it's specifically, when you read it and you see it, it's related to how we operate around alcohol, if in context to the book. But I frankly think I walk around this earth safe and protected now. So that I can go to those kind of places like that without being full of fear. Because fear would have turned me around at some point. And trust that that's where the real reliance on a higher power, a real reliance on a power greater than yourself, whatever that means to you, will allow you to go places that you wouldn't have normally gone, and know that you're going to be okay. And and time and time again, there's some kind of reward at the end of it. And that's even if it's just eye candy of a beautiful spot. We get to experience that. I had a similar kind of thing where I was staying on top of, and I should be able to remember the name of it, but it's the mountain in that overlooks the city of Nagasaki, Japan.
Oh wow!
And I've been on probation up until I think, and I've told the story enough times, but I've been on probation, and I was afraid at work, all that home incarceration probation, I was afraid I was going to get asked to travel. I got asked to travel for my job a lot. And they never did ask me to travel during that time. But I got put on a team where I was going to be going to Japan, and it happened 6 months before my probation was up. Yeah. And the trip kept getting postponed and postponed and postponed and postponed. And, and I had a lot of fear wrapped up around that. And I even talked to my probation officer, and she was like, yeah, they might let you go to Alabama or, to someplace like that, but I don't know that their courts are going to let you go to Japan, man.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, okay, but it's a good sponsorship stuff, well, that is not a problem for today.
Yeah.
You don't have a ticket in your pocket. And it got postponed, and on February the 18th, I was off of probation, good, and off the paper, and 10 days later, I was on a plane over there. And
wow.
It got postponed until I was off my probation, and then we flew out. And none of the other guys that was with me understood the impact of what that was. But for 2 years, I had to ask the government, the corrections people, if I could leave these few counties here in this area. And most of the time the answer was no. And for 2 years. And here I am standing 10 days after that ends on top of a mountain in Nagasaki, Japan, with the Japanese sunset, the sun setting over the Japanese ocean behind me.
Wow.
And watching the lights come on in what is known as like the top third nightscape in the world, behind like Hong Kong and Morocco or something, of looking down into this valley and this port city come to life at the night. And I just was flooded with emotion, you know. And,
Yeah.
My coworkers that are with me, you know, they don't have a clue about what is going on with Dan right here at the moment. We had to take a gondola up to this thing.
Uh-huh.
And I knew where I was going all day Friday when we got off work. I said, I'm going there.
That's awesome.
And, yeah, you get to walk out to those places, you know, and stand there and stand there. I'm sure the same thing happened to you in Hawaii, that rush of gratitude that's unexplainable.
Yeah.
Floods over you, like, you know, like I mean, so you like there's that feeling of, you know, that where I am standing right now, I am standing doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, where I'm supposed to be doing it right this moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I always felt like I need to be over there.
Yep.
You know, all my life, it was there, somewhere else that I needed to be, and I'd be okay. And to be able to be standing exactly where I need to be, doing exactly what I need to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly where I should be standing, doing exactly what I should be doing, is a very comforting feeling.
Yeah.
And that is safe and protected.
Yeah.
We usually either have a sigh or an awkward silence or something. I always know whenever we're getting ready to run out of
Give me a
gas.
sigh.
Yeah. No. Just it's interesting to watch because we go, you know, and all of a sudden it's like. And it's like in yoga we did sharing, and we would say, you know, a lot of times you see here and around us we say, that's all I got, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people say that's all I got,
Yeah.
or thank you for allowing me to share, or, you know, like that. In my yoga teacher training, we would say we were complete in the moment, and I like that little caveat on the end of it, was that, you know, I haven't necessarily said it all, but I think I'm complete right now. Because they wanted you to feel that way, so that you got out what you needed to get out,
Yeah.
and shared what you needed to share, so that you were complete in the moment. That's 2 hours.
I think I'm complete in the moment.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it.
Me too.
I love your stories. You come alive at the other side, and you do it when I see you talk any time. You know, there's like it's almost like a recovery personality kind of thing takes over, and that doesn't sound like the right thing, but the joy that's under that makes that
Yeah.
blooms, you know, and you glow when you're sharing about this stuff. It's a really cool thing to see. We have a gift, and I'm glad you shared yours with me today. I always get to know somebody better. You heard the thing, people we've heard of collateral damage all forever, right? There's a collateral benefit to this little thing.
Yeah.
And what it is I get to know somebody better as a result of sitting here doing this. You know, I can hear you sharing a meeting, and I can get to know you a little bit. But under the 2 hours sitting around together, you know, sometimes, you know, I don't know the person when they get here, and they leave, and we're friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a cool thing.
Yeah. It's great.
All right, man. Well, once in a while we have round tables, and we do other stuff around here. So if you ever, you know, I throw it out there once in a while. Sometimes we get 4 or 5 guys sitting here and talk recovery and just powwow.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me to the wood shop.
Yeah.
It's all kinds of cool stuff to look at too.
Yeah. It's, I got it decorated pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't have much. Not too long ago, I had some more stuff hang on the wall, and I had to move things to make room for some new stuff. I sit out here all the time. I'll sit out here and kick back over in my chair, put my feet up on the workbench, and just hang out here by myself.
Uh-huh.
I piddle out here all the time. I throw a tablecloth over top of this table, and I take that piece of plywood up there and lay it on top of this, and then this becomes a work surface.
Oh, cool.
When it's not a podcast table. I don't want to drill into it. And,
right.
You know, but
That's
I can
a nice
assemble
table.
stuff, and and it's sturdy enough. You know, it makes a good spot to work. I thought about building a real workbench table out here, but and I thought about moving this inside and move my studio inside. All my friends said, no, leave it out here. This is where it belongs.
Yeah. It's cool.
So, I've been hauling around this piece of mahogany for 20 years.
Looks heavy.
A friend of mine was here helping me plane some boards, and it was leaning over there against the wall. And I said, Mike, will you help me get that out and get this on some sawhorses? And one end of it was cut with chainsaw. It was all crooked. And I got it out, set it on, and I took one of the block planes up there, an old hand block plane, and just went to work on it.
Nice.
And it was
Turned out nice.
rough, and it's still not, it's hand planed. And I'm playing around with different finishes. This is a tongue oil, and once it sets up real good, I'll buff it and see if I like that. I've stripped it and refinished it about 4 times. It's been here
Really?
less than a year. Yeah, I can't get happy with so it's like a hobby refinishing the top of this table.
Real sturdy.
Yeah.
Made of wood.
Made of wood. Thank you, man. Thank you for coming in today. Any concluders?
No, I think that's it for
Concluding
me.
thoughts?
Thank you. This has been a blast.
Yeah, you just took my word, because I get a little email every morning, and it says, and I close every podcast with this: if you're not having a blast in your recovery, it's your own damn fault. And I thank everyone. I usually thank for myself. I've taken it again. So thank you all out there for allowing Nate and I to participate in our recoveries tonight in this manner. Peace out.
Always tried to be just who they wanted. Always tried to do everything they said. Only did the things they would approve of. Locked away all your dreams inside your head. Year after year you try to be a good girl. They never failed to point out when you were bad. Stuck to the program like a robot. Became a trophy for mom and dad. But inside you want more. Everything you've been waiting for. Looking for that open door. So every day in your head, in your heart just keeps saying, let go and fly. Let go and fly. Spread your wings to the sky. Let go and fly. Ever since you was a little boy, they told you, suck it up and be a man. It's time